Well, over the New Year break, there were a number of farewells, resignations and sackings, and they were all excellent. January was not just a good day, but a good month. So obviously the first major departure, our first bye-bye, was President Joe Biden, although nobody realised he was actually still in the job. Here's some reasons we won't miss him. Now, according to a very good summary from the Daily Signal website, under the heading Abortion, Biden began by implementing abortion policies that have become standard for Democratic administrations. He rescinded the Trump administration's strengthened version of the Mexico City policy, which prevents US tax dollars from funding abortion organisations overseas. The Biden administration Department of Justice challenged state laws that protected unborn babies in the womb. However, the Biden administration took its pro-abortion agenda much further, especially after the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court overturning in 2022. Biden's Food and Drug Administration removed the basic safety requirement for chemical abortion pills to be dispensed in person, and Biden's Department of Defense unilaterally changed its policy to begin paying for service members and their family members to travel across state lines to obtain an abortion. Yep, Biden was obsessed with abortion. But, so was Kamala. It was basically their whole campaign, their only campaign. And it's good riddance to all of it, although sadly Kamala could be back. There was also the LGBT agenda. Earlier in his term, Biden directed all executive agencies to pursue a whole-of-government approach to advancing the LGBT agenda. The State Department added preferred pronouns to all email bylines. And on Easter Sunday, 2024, Biden issued a public proclamation recognising a transgender day of visibility, but not one recognising Easter. Yeah. The Biden administration wanted to allow biological males to compete in women's sports. It would have punished school officials for using incorrect pronouns, and it would have let biological males into women's locker rooms and restrooms, a so-called Title IX, which is just being defeated, thankfully. And Biden was a big campaigner for gender ideology and transing our children, and this type of stunt that was held at the White House. Apologies for that slightly offensive image, but this is what Biden would go on about transing and gender ideology.
For example, the onslaught of anti-transgender state laws attacking you and your families is simply wrong. This administration is standing up for you against all these hateful bills, and we're committed to advancing transgender equality in the classroom, on the playing field, at work, in our military, in our housing and healthcare systems, everywhere, simply everywhere. Today, we're announcing even more steps.
Yep, he wanted it everywhere, including this one.
Children, affirming your child's identity is one of the most powerful things you can do to keep them safe and healthy.
But probably most concerning was the weaponization of the law. The Biden administration's weaponization of justice was not only directed at Trump. The DOJ colluded with school boards to investigate, using counter-terrorism resources, parents who confronted school boards at public meetings over their woke policies. The FBI spied on traditional Catholics on the absurd notion that they were domestic terrorists. The Department of Justice also aggressively prosecuted pro-lifers for protesting at abortion facilities years earlier, while doing nearly nothing to investigate scores of acts of vandalism against pro-life pregnancy resource centres committed in 2022. The good news is that Trump has just pardoned all those pro-life protesters. When a doctor blew the whistle on a hospital secretly providing gender transition drugs to minors in violation of state law, the Department of Justice under Biden investigated the doctor, not the hospital, charged him with serious criminal penalties, and tried to obtain a gag order against him. The weaponisation of government stretches all the way back to the COVID-19 era, where the Biden administration fired military service members and others who refused to take the untested vaccine. The Biden administration tried to implement a similar mandate for private businesses, but federal courts quickly struck that down. Additionally, files released after Elon Musk's 2022 purchase of Twitter showed intense collusion between the government and big tech entities to censor the legitimate opinions of American citizens who questioned the official government narratives about COVID-19 or other issues. And we'll come back to that one about censorship shortly. But to add insult to injury, at the beginning of this year, President Joe Biden rewarded one of the left's most influential and notorious donors, giving the Presidential Medal of Freedom to George Soros, the man on the far right. The White House announced the honour in a list of 19 recipients, including former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and an LGBTQ megadonor, Tim Gill. Now, Biden framed George Soros's funding as philanthropy in service of democracy and social justice. You may not have heard of George Soros. He's a Hungarian-American billionaire investor. He's funneled more than 15 billion through his Open Society Foundation, now run by his son Alex, which has awarded more than 50,000 grants worldwide, according to the World Economic Forum. He's bankrolled rogue prosecutor soft-on-crime movements. And he's also, well, basically, he has funded anything which has enabled Biden allies to implement their radical agenda through the government. You think of it: abortion, LGBT, soft-on-crime, prostitution, surrogacy, conversion therapy laws, gender studies, anti-Semitism, woke ideology. Soros has helped fund them all. He's also worked overtime to censor his opposition and label them as anti-rights. So it's bye-bye to President Biden, apparently the most unpopular president since Richard Nixon. Which leads to our second bye-bye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Fact checkers. And this actually links, so fact checkers are the people that go through social media, your Facebook, your LinkedIn. People, if you're on social media, you'll know what I'm referring to. And it actually links to just confirm how sneaky and underhand the Biden administration has been. It's just been conclusively proved. Mark Zuckerberg, who founded Facebook and who for so many years used fact checkers to take down posts they didn't like, or anybody who said that only women can get pregnant. Well, Zuckerberg finally admitted the fact that fact checkers would be fact checked into retirement. Brilliant. Now have a listen to some of his announcement and note that he admits that they've been shutting down discussion on gender ideology, which I think is actually one of the most significant things in this announcement, but also his dig at the legacy media and their declining trust.
First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms.
Yeah, interesting. But then he went on to Joe Rogan's podcast, one of the most popular podcasts in the world, to spill even more beans. And have a listen to the pressure that Zuckerberg admits the Biden administration placed on social media companies, not only to bury, for example, the Hunter Biden laptop story, but to attack any dissenting voice against the science. Now, remember, this is the same silencing and censoring that the Ardern administration was doing here in New Zealand and has continued to try and do through disinformation projects and the Christchurch call. Have a watch.
People from the Biden administration would call up our team and like scream at them and curse, and it's like these documents it's all kind of out there.
Did you record any of those phone calls?
I don't think we but I think
I want to listen.
I mean, there are emails. the emails are published. It's all kind of out there, and they're like, and basically it just got to this point where we were like, no, we're not gonna take down things that are true. That's ridiculous. They want us to take down this meme of Leonardo DiCaprio looking at a TV talking about how 10 years from now or something, you're going to see an ad that says, okay, if you took a COVID vaccine, you're eligible for, for this kind of payment, like this sort of like class action lawsuit type meme. And they're like, no, you have to take that down. And we just said, no, we're not going to take down humor and satire. We're not going to take down things that are true. And then at some point, I guess, I don't know, it flipped a bit. I mean, Biden, when he gave some statement at some point, I don't know if it was a press conference or to some journalists, where he basically was like, these guys are killing people. And I don't know, then like all these different agencies and branches of government basically just like started investigating and coming after our company. It was brutal. It was brutal. Right. I mean, they basically pushed us and said, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. And I was just like, well, we're not going to do that. Like, we're clearly not going to do that. I mean, that is kind of inarguably true.
Who is they? Who's telling you to take down things that
it was
that talk about vaccine side effects?
It was people in the Biden administration.
Well, they were taking things down or slapping major warnings on them or reducing their seeability, the algorithm, so that people didn't see them. The following year, Zuckerberg admitted that his company deliberately banned pro-life adverts from running on social media sites during the abortion referendum in Ireland in the previous year. Don't trust the people, eh? And also in 2019, when speaking before Congress, he said there was clearly bias and repeated false fact-checking of Lila Rose's Live Action, which is the largest pro-life organisation on social media. But fact checkers have always been an oxymoron, fact and checking, because it's always been left-wing groups or media doing the checking. And Kiwi commentator Liam Hare on his Substack, The Blue Review, highlighted another pro-abortion fact check. In 2008, PolitiFact examined a claim that the then Senator Barack Obama had opposed the Illinois Born Alive Infant Protection Law. These are designed to ensure that an infant who is born alive, even during or after an attempted abortion, is afforded the same legal rights and protections as any other living person. In other words, if the abortion fails to kill the baby, which is subsequently born, the state is required to care to ensure it does not die. The answer was simple. Obama had, as a state senator, opposed various versions of the law multiple times. The central fact that Obama voted against the bill was indisputable, yet PolitiFact appeared more interested in explaining away the vote than fact-checking it, simply verifying the claim. So instead of stating the facts clearly, it buried the lead under a mountain of defensive context about why Obama had opposed the bill, offering justifications about its wording and its perceived implications for abortion rights. This approach wasn't fact-checking, it was advocacy. And it was an early indication of the fatal flaw in the fact-checking industry, the inability to separate facts from the broader political narratives surrounding them. Now, of course, the same thing happened here in New Zealand with Jacinda Ardern's abortion bill and late-term abortions and disability abortions. The media worked overtime to hide the true intent and effect of the law. In fact, they still are. In September 2020, Facebook applied a fact-check label to an ad campaign that drew attention to the Democrats' support for allowing transgender women, who are biologically dudes, to compete in women's sports. And yet it was true, and we've seen the evidence. The Democrats do support that. And one more shocking one. Facebook notified Live Action founder and president Lila Rose, now Lila spoke at our conference 2 years ago, that her organisation's pro-life posts would be subject to reduced distribution and other restrictions after additional reporting from an independent fact-checker who had deemed the content false news. And they'd also notified Live Action and its founders' combined 3 million followers that it was fake news. So they weren't only blocking it, they were actually telling Live Action's supporters, apparently, that it was false news. According to Live Action, the content marked false by Facebook had been 2 videos affirming that abortion is never medically necessary. One video featured neonatologist Dr. Kendra Kolb discussing the topic, and the second video showed a recent speech by the organisation's founder speaking on the same subject. Live Action told Breitbart News that Facebook's third-party fact-checking consisted of an article that quoted 2 abortionists, Daniel Grossman and Robin Schickler, who both have a vested interest in profiting off the procedure. So maybe it's not only the fact-checkers that need to be booted, but also Mark Zuckerberg. Many people are rightly suspicious about this sudden change of tune. So it's bye-bye fact-checkers. And our final bye-bye goes to Canada's worst ever leader, Justin Trudeau. Where do we start?
I intend to resign as party leader, as prime minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
Yeah, okay. Let me just quote a few bits from Daily Signal's analysis. Trudeau has essentially become the poster child for the unpopular policies that Canadians see as contributing to higher prices of living and the current housing crisis. Most fascinating during the speech is how Trudeau listed his administration's COVID-19 policies as being among one of his greatest achievements in office. His COVID-19 policies led to the months-long Freedom Convoy in 2022, a little bit like the parliamentary protest here in New Zealand. And boy, you might remember that. Canadian authorities then blocked funding and seized bank accounts associated with the protests and cleared out the encampments. Just like the protest in Wellington over mandates, Canada's political establishment and the legacy media lined up to blast the Freedom Convoy. Months later, Canadian Broadcasting News reported that the Canadian government had known even before it invoked the Act that its rationale was nonsense. And in 2024, the beginning of last year, a Canadian court ruled the government should never have invoked the Act. But Trudeau said he had no regrets. He originally called people protesting against the mandates as a fringe minority. We had that against protesters in New Zealand also. Have a watch.
Canadians have stepped up to do the right thing to protect the freedoms and the rights of Canadians to get back to the things we love to do. We know the way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing,
that we disagree with,
do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
But not their freedoms and rights. But then a report came out in 2023 criticising Trudeau's fringe remark and said that it had emboldened the protesters and further embittered them towards government authorities. Anyway, Trudeau then sort of expressed regret, but as you watch this clip, note that he then tries to just himself by using the old trope of disinformation and misinformation.
Do you have any regrets about calling Ottawa protesters a fringe minority?
Yeah, I wish I had said that differently. As I look back on that and you know, as I've reflected on it over the past months, not just freshly from this commissioner's report, I wish I had phrased it differently. The fact is, there
But-
is a very small number of people in this country who deliberately spread misinformation and disinformation that led to Canadians' deaths, that led to excessive hardship in people who believed them.
Yeah, but of course we had that here in New Zealand. Remember that Labour MP calling the protesters here a river of filth? Did he ever apologise for
At
that?
the front of this place, there are people who I think we all feel for. There are some people who are confused. There are some people who are scared. There are some people who have been manipulated by an avalanche of misinformation. There are some people who have been hurt over the past couple of years and they're lashing out, and we feel for those people. But underneath all of that, Madam Speaker, there is a river of filth. There is a river of violence and menace. There is a river of anti-Semitism. There is a river of Islamophobia. There is a river of threats to people who work in this place and our staff. And those are things that we should not in any way be condoning, things that we should be apologists for, things that we should be overlooking with a rhetoric that it's all just good people and maybe we should talk about it and maybe we should put the mandates up for negotiation. I would say, Madam Speaker, that there is a river of genuine fascism in parts of the event that we see out the front of this Parliament today.
Yeah, okay, that's enough of that. Okay, now just back to the Canada story. This commentary was interesting. The Canadian courts across the country denied numerous requests for religious or conscientious objections. But here's the key bit. What was most egregious during the COVID-19 pandemic was Trudeau's apathy towards Christians. His most blatant public display of this was in 2021. There was a mass grave site of First Nations children found at a residential school run by a Roman Catholic church in southeastern Saskatchewan. And during just a few weeks prior, a similar mass grave site was found in British Columbia. Now this set in motion the Summer of Fire. Sounds a bit like BLM riots. In 2021 alone, 90 churches across the country were burned to the ground. Being such a nationwide epidemic, one would think Trudeau would have strongly condemned such violence. However, in his statement after the height of these attacks, he discussed that he understood the anger the arsonists were feeling. He went on to apologise for the government and then called on the schools and Pope Francis himself to apologise. Speaking of the arsonists, he said, quote, "It's real and it is fully understandable given the shameful history we're all becoming more aware of," end quote. Now, this all happened as Trudeau's administration imposed COVID-19 lockdown restrictions upon churches as well. While most of the world was locking down to prevent the spread of disease, Canada was also jailing pastors, fining them, and seizing properties and assets if these congregants tried to worship together. All the while, grocery stores, liquor stores, marijuana dispensaries, and other essential businesses remained legally open. Some of us still remember Trudeau's campaign beginning with the promise of freedom of choices, most prominently a woman's right to choose an abortion and a person's right to choose the LGBTQ plus lifestyle. However, his policies did not include protecting the freedoms of those who believed in upholding Christ and Christian values. Thus, as he steps down, let us not forget his legacy, lest we become doomed to repeat it. Let us remember the Trudeau legacy is one of true religious bigotry and persecution, and vow to not let it happen again, either on Canadian or American shores. Ouch. Now, just finally, as ex-New York Times journalist Alex Berenson commented, and Berenson was actually here in New Zealand as our guest just before COVID struck. He says this: Trudeau's approval rating, which lurked around 40% for most of 2022, sank further since as media-driven COVID panic receded. Let me just show you that graph. That was the decline and anger. So as media-driven COVID panic receded and anger at the rampage over civil liberties grew. Now Trudeau, this is Alex Berenson speaking, now Trudeau has joined Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand. And, of course, our own President Biden, Berenson is American, on a long list of tin pot COVID dictators who have faced their own reckoning. It couldn't have happened to a nicer bunch. So yeah, those graphs are very similar, aren't they? So the slippery slopes are very similar. I did have this photo just to show you. They look similar. Anyway, it is bye-bye Justin, Joe, and fact checkers. January has been a very good month. The adults are back in charge.